Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello and welcome to the show, folks. We're delighted to have you. This is a brand new series that we've only recently launched, myself and Rabbi Shlomo Gemara. How are you, Rabbi Gemara?
I'm very well. How are you, Avrum?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much. Just for your own edification, Rabbi Gemara is a teacher. He's an educator. He was a Rosh Yeshiva at Or Chaim Yeshiva here in Toronto, and now is vice principal at Chat, which is a community high school. One of the only Jewish high schools in North America. He was born in Petach Tikva. He came here in 1993 as a shaliach for 4 years, went back home, and they called him back, and he's been teaching here ever since. He's very much an advocate of learning Torah and Judaism, but doing so in an eclectic manner, doing so with humor, and juxtaposing it with other literature. Hence, our idea. What we are pursuing now. The idea is that we will be taking the Parsha of the week, the portion of the Torah, as we call it, which is weekly, and comparing it to, putting it next to classic literature. What we're doing today is studying Parshat Korach, and we are juxtaposing it with Julius Caesar. So, Rabbi, once again, welcome. I'm delighted to be doing this series with you. It's an honor. And
my honor and pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure as well. My question to you, Rabbi, is what was the genesis of this idea? Where did it come from?
You talk about Korach and Julius Caesar, or in general?
The whole idea, what we're doing here, this brand new series.
The whole idea came into mind when I entered a class of English literature, and I envied the dynamics of the class. There was such a beautiful discussion between students and teachers, and students thinking critically about the themes and about the figures of the play. I think it was Othello by Shakespeare. And I say, man, this should happen in every Tanakh class. This should happen in every rabbinic class, because if the students are so engaged and involved in English literature, we have to offer even more. Like every story in the Torah is something that you really have to learn, and you can grow from it, and you can see so many layers in it. Why don't we do it? So I found you one day, and you were the victim of this idea. You know, I said, Avrum, let's do something about it, because my real hope is that teachers for Jewish studies or English literature will see the beauty of combining two words that seems to be very far from each other, and in a way even compete against each other, and to show, no, they are not competing. They complementing each other.
Very good. Now, let's go to part B of my question to you, is that I grew up in a religious environment. I studied in yeshiva for 6 years, and I have been studying very intensely over the last 4 years. A lot of my life, I have actually dreaded Torah learning, in particular Talmud, which I know you have said that many people find it boring, but you said taught well, it's a gem. Some of the things that I have gleaned from my Torah learning, especially over the last 4 years, have been the sharing the truth of the Torah, if you will, with other people has brought me together with our people more so than ever before. I have gained great pride in being a Jew, in particular because of the Torah and the gift that we have, the brilliance of it, how much it makes me think, how much it makes me wonder. It makes me a better father, makes me a better human being. What is it about Torah to you, Rabbi, which is so incredibly powerful? Anyone who knows you knows as Rabbi Shlomo Gomorrah, and he is a learner and an educator of Torah. That's how people see you. What's so powerful about it to you?
The answer is quite simple. I try to take everything that I learn, if it's a Chumash or a Gemara, Mishnah, or even Jewish history, and to say, what does that mean to me today? I'm a person, I want to grow, I want to understand better, I want to delve into the depth of things. And I find Torah as something that enriched my life in unbelievable way. From every halacha, a rule, from every pasuk in the Torah, every verse in the Torah speaks to me. And I always find myself a different person than the person before I learned this verse or this rule or this story in the Talmud. It just transformed the person I am.
Are you one of those lucky ones who just happens to inherently love learning? And there are many people who say, listen, I really don't want to pick up a book. It's not in me.
Lucky, yes, I feel lucky about it, because indeed, whatever I'm doing, I get something from it. I'm indeed one of the people who maybe never worked 1 minute in their life, because everything is actually experience for me. I don't feel that I work. I feel that I gain from what I do. And if they pay me for this is even greater. The people who you say not lucky, they are not lucky because it doesn't mean to them. They are not lucky because, unfortunately, they did not have educators or teachers in their life who taught them how to be inspired by what they read. So you can read something and it means nothing to you. I was lucky to have teachers and to develop skills of learning from what I learned, from what I study. And this is something very different, because you can have lots of knowledge, you can accumulate lots of knowledge, but at the end of the day, you are not a learner. And I was lucky because I met few people in my life, including my parents, that taught me how to learn, how to enjoy what I learn. I can tell you about my father. He's not a young person. He's now after his mid-90s, and he's still going to classes. And this is a person who never got education. In the years of the war, there was no education. But the love for learning is part of him. And I do believe that my father's love for learning, my mother's love for reading influenced me a lot. And I myself developed these skills, and I hope, not sure, that I managed to transmit it to my children as well.
You have a beautiful soul, Rabbi, I must tell you. I'm
Thank
so
you.
honored to be doing this with you. I can't tell you. It's wonderful for me. And I pointed out to you prior to going to air that I have a great debt of gratitude to you in terms of I've already enhanced my reading. As an example, next week we will be using a story from Tolstoy. I've never read Tolstoy before. And on your recommendation, I bought the book that we'll be using, and I'm enamored by it, absolutely enamored by it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
My hope is, I have also my goals from this podcast, and it's investment to both of us, no questions about it. I just hope that I will influence one person to open a book and to read it, and to compare it to what he already knows from reading the Torah, because our brain works in a beautiful way. It connects dots all the time.
Yeah.
And I do believe that once you are going to read Dostoevsky or Tolstoy or Shakespeare, as we are going to do today, you will say, I know it from somewhere. I actually thought about it before, and you are going to realize that this is something that you read last week's Parsha, or you are going to read this week's Parsha, because it's connected.
Excellent, excellent. One little tidbit about the rabbi, and then we are going to dive into our Parsha and Julius Caesar. You began teaching when you were in grade 4?
I wouldn't say in grade 4, but I'll tell you when I got my first official position.
Yeah.
This was in grade 9.
Oh, grade 9.
This
I'm
was
sorry. Yes, grade 9.
grade
Yeah.
9. Grade 9. I taught students in grade 4 and 5.
I'm sorry. Yes, that's correct.
And yes, this was quite amazing experience, and it can happen only in Israel. The circumstances was very unfortunate. It was at the time of the Yom Kippur War. And I got one day a call from my principal in the elementary school asking me to come to teach. And listen, it was such a feeling that you have to do something for the country. And here I got this invitation. I was not sure why I got it. And it turned to be a beautiful experience.
It's great. Great. You know, it's those little things that happen in life, in particular when you're a youngster, and they have such a great effect on you later on.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
You know, if we just talk about it, and I really want to go back to Julius Caesar, but I think it's very important because it reminds me the days today. One of my greatest experiences that I realized only decades after was in grade 9, where most of our teachers were in the army. And listen, like, we didn't know what to do with ourselves. And one day, an old person with a cane came into class, introduced himself as Mr. Gatti, and he told us that he's going to be our math teacher. And we all started to laugh because you cannot even imagine, like, an old person on a cane, he's going to teach us math. That's impossible, because even the young dynamic teacher that we had could not do it well. So this guy is going to do it. And he did it. The guy came from Hungary with a rich tradition of teaching and learning. It was quite amazing. At the time, I did not appreciate it, but thinking about it years later, and then we learned also that he lost his first family in the Holocaust. He had one child when he came to Israel. Like, I started to look on teachers in a very, very different way. And I always try to say, Alevai, that I will be on the level of some of my teachers. I know that I will never be, but some of them I try to imitate.
Excellent. Halavai means, how would you translate Halavai?
Alevai, I hope it.
It should be so.
Yeah.
It should be so.
It should be so.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are studying the Torah. We study it every single week. There are 54 portions in the entire Torah, one read every week, 2 weeks a year where we will actually read 2 parshiot, 2 portions. We're in the book of Numbers, or the desert, Bamidbar, okay? And we have already gone through 3 portions. This is the 4th portion in the book, and it is called Korach. It's a fascinating, very compelling parsha, having to do with leadership, having to do with a struggle, with a challenge to leadership. And just let me give you a quick synopsis, and then we'll tell you about Julius Caesar. The portion in the Torah called Korach, Numbers 16 to 18, tells the story of Korach, a cousin of Moses and Aaron, 2 of the main characters in the Bible, who leads a rebellion against their leadership. Korach, along with 250 followers, challenged Moses and Aaron's authority, claiming that all the people are holy and questioning why Moses and Aaron have elevated themselves above the community. Okay, so throughout this this podcast, think about that fundamental point. This man comes along, he's a cousin of Moses and Aaron, and he says, "What makes you so great? What makes you so big? You're any better than us?" You'll hear about that in Israel very often. It's the people will say to you, "Mi ata bechlal," right? Who are you? Okay, so that's our short intro to Korach. There's much more to say. Julius Caesar, a book or novella that we all read when we were younger. Julius Caesar, a tragedy by William Shakespeare, unfolds in ancient Rome amidst political turmoil and conspiracy. The play revolves around the power struggle between the ambitious Caesar, beloved by the common people, but viewed with suspicion by the Senate, and a group of senators led by Brutus and Cassius, who fear Caesar's growing authority. You're starting to see what we're doing here, right? Driven by Cassius' manipulation and Brutus's idealism, the conspirators assassinate Caesar on the Ides of March, so the 15th of March. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal friend, delivers a stirring funeral oration. Lend me your ear. We all remember that. That turns the Roman mob against the conspirators, leading to a civil war between Caesar's supporters and the conspirators. Rabbi Shlomo Gemara, let's talk about the juxtaposition of these two. The main piece here is a challenge to leadership, right?
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is that in the resistance and opposition to leadership, you have two different levels. You have the overt one, the one that they present to the people, and there is a covert one, like something that the eye does not see at the first time. And by the way, great literature always try to show you the motives and the motivation behind certain things that presented to the public as A, but actually is B. So if we take, for example, the example of Korach, he spoke about idealism. His main claim against Moses and Aaron was, you take everything to yourself, while the entire community are holy people. They were on Har Sinai, they all heard the words of Torah, and lo and behold, you came and you possess leadership, priesthood, and it's where is the equality here? Every one of the community is holy. Why you? Mm-hmm. And you know what? This sounds very, especially in our days when you talk about equality, this sounds very idealistic and very, this is the truth. Why certain people will elevate themselves over the other ones? But when you look into the motives behind it, our sages come and say, you know what? It was not so about ideals. It was about power. It was about politics. Korach himself thought that I deserve to be a leader no less than Moses or Aaron, and especially when a remote cousin, Elitzaphan, was appointed to a job, he felt completely humiliated by it because he was rich, according to our sages. He had a leadership position, and this actually was behind the scenes. Our sages defined the debate and the opposition, machloket shelo leshem shamayim. This split was not for the sake of heaven. Namely, it was not about ideals, about ideas. It was about politics and power.
There's one other piece that we should add, and this speaks to the digging of learning Torah. That when we learn Torah, it's not all face value, as you said, but we study what we call the meforshim. We study those individuals throughout history. It's multi-generational Torah study who come up with different concepts and ideas. And there's one other piece which people talk about in terms of Korach's pursuit of leadership is that he was also the firstborn. Tell us about that.
So the tribe of Levi had few major families. And Kehat, for example, was the head of one family that Moses and Aaron came from. And they got all the best jobs. They were the carriers of the Aaron. it was clear that they are the leading family within the Levites tribe. There were some other Merari and other families, head of families, and Korach would not belong to the major family. So he had a good job, by the way. He was, according to our sages, the head of the Mishorim, the singers in Beit HaMikdash. So he had the exposure to the people, and he led this important, I would say, the Levite concerts on the Korbanot and other things. But this was not enough. He wanted the leadership itself. By the way, many people say that this is the source of the dispute sometimes, not to say more than that, between the Chazen and the Rabbi. Because Korach was the Chazen and Moshe was the Rabbi. So you can see that from the very beginning, you have this tension that killed not one or two shuls, but many more than that. So here you have the first time. By the way, I want to tell you, you remember we spoke about Lord of the Flies. You know, very interestingly, Jack was the head of the choir before the crash on the island. And when I told you that, you know, it looks to me that Goulding actually knew Parshat Korach, now I'm convinced that maybe he knew it even with the Meforshim and with the Midrash that say that Korach was the head of the singers. So I don't know, you know what, it might be surprising, but it's really interesting. I find it more than surprising that in this story about challenging leadership, Jack is the head of the choir, and Korach in our story, again, opposition to leadership, is the head of the singers. Very interesting.
Rabbi, it's very clear that both Korach and Julius Caesar were noted for their ambition. They were highly ambitious individuals. Tell us, how can ambition be a driving force for both good and for destructive elements in leadership? And if you can provide some historical evidence for that.
Well, I would say that ambition is a number one requirement for a leader. You know, you need a good reason to lead other people. And you have to be very motivated and very ambitious to overcome all the obstacles on the way of a leader. So if you are not ambitious, you will not be a leader. And by the way, the Torah is telling us about Moshe Rabbeinu that actually he was very unambitious person. He did not want to become a leader. That maybe made him even a greater leader, because normally ambition can, as you say, pursue your good side of leadership, but at the same time, ambition blinds you to see the problems, the people that you have to lead. And this, by the way, is standing on the way of every single leader, failing from realizing the problems, the issues that the people that you want to lead have in their life. And if you take any leader in the modern world or the ancient world, they all faced the same issues. They were ambitious. The question is, where did it take them? To destruction or to building a nation? And Julius Caesar is a person who actually was one of the most important builders of Rome, as we know it today, but at the same time, too much power to a leader is very dangerous, something that some of the people on the Senate realized, and actually at the end, they killed Julius Caesar because of it. They saw that he's a little bit too ambitious.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, you know, the historians say that essentially what Caesar did was took Rome from a democracy to much more of a dictatorship, perhaps not the dictatorships that we know today. When you look at modern day Zimbabwe, which used to be Rhodesia, when Robert Mugabe stepped in, his goals were very pure and were very positive. about helping, the regular folk and building up that country. By the time he died, he had become a full-blown dictator.
Absolutely. And you don't have to go that far. I don't know if you heard Biden last night talking about the Supreme Court giving what seems to be unlimited power to the president, not only to Trump. And his claim was exactly the same. How is it possible that one person will hold power which is actually above the law? And indeed, Julius Caesar was looking for a power like this. I mean, it did not come in a vacuum, his assassination. And, Shakespeare and Julius Caesar, with describing Brutus, the person who gave him the last stab, as an honorable person. Because the idea of taking too much power is indeed a very dangerous idea. And one person might do a wonderful thing with it, but once you introduce the idea of dictatorship, it's going to sour one day or another. And again, this is part of the story of our Bible. King David was fantastic until a certain point where too much power led him to immoral actions. The kingdom that split from King Solomon by Jeroboam, they went through a constant decline because they had too much power, and you cannot overcome it normally unless you going to turn the streets to bloodbath, which we are not interested in. So history is full with examples of people who were very ambitious, they meant well, and it was corrupted over time.
Rabbi, both Korach and Julius Caesar challenged established leadership in their respective contexts. What do their stories teach us about the nature of legitimate authority and the consequences of challenging it?
I don't think that the story of Julius Caesar itself is the only story that's telling us what are the results of challenging authority and what can it lead to, because it led to two different things. It led to a fight in the Roman Empire on one hand. At the same time, when Augustus, his adopted son, became the emperor, Rome enjoyed a great time of prosperity and became a real empire that controlled most of the world as we knew it then. But I want to talk about one issue that I think is not well emphasized in the literature about Julius Caesar, which is an extremely, extremely important work of Shakespeare. One of the elements of the story is the crowd of Rome, and how the crowd can change his mind like a field in a wind. Once Brutus, Cassius, they want to talk against Julius, everyone joined them. Once Anthony, in his famous speech that you just mentioned, speak about the greatness of Caesar and actually turn the crowd against the people who murdered him, they move to the other side. So in every leadership, the most important thing is the crowd. Not so much the leaders, but how strong is the crowd and how morally the crowd to accept certain ideas and certain sort of leadership. And what I find really amazing in our Torah is that the Torah is not talking only about the rules of the king. The Torah is talking also about the duties of the king. He has to listen to the prophet in order not to cross certain lines. And to the people of the Torah. The Torah democratizes the whole system of rules. Every one of us has to be a moral person. Every one of us has to do certain things, no matter if the king said so or differently. We have to keep certain rules. So rules are not only to the ruler, rules are actually for everyone. And we have to keep them as a very simple citizens, something that was lacking, I believe, in the culture of Rome. Once the ruler is doing something, you cannot do anything beyond it. So with all the checks and balances that they had in the Roman Empire and even before in the Republic, were not enough. Once a person wanted to assume power, there was almost nothing to stop it unless it was like a murder, as it happened in Julius Caesar. So this is a very important point that I want the readers to look into. This is a crowd, the people who are being led by the leader, not only the leader himself.
So, Rabbi, you go down a very interesting road here. What Korach challenged Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron. God's response was to open up the earth and to swallow him up, as well as the 250 men and their families, who were following them. And what happened to the Jewish people once they saw that happening? They basically ran away. My question to you, based on what you just said about being able to lead the masses, what was the moral background of the Jewish people?
The Jewish people were, we have to remember, they were a nation of slaves only 2 years before. Nations of slaves. And slaves have very little personality of their own. So it's true that they went through they saw the Red Sea split. They got the Torah. They became prophets when Hashem came to the mountain of Sinai and gave them the Torah. But there is something in our psyche. If a person maintained a personality of a slave, he will be very influenced by powerful people. And Korach was a very powerful person. Chazal described him as a very wealthy person. He accumulated actually wealth even in Egypt. As I said, he was an important person. You can see in our Parsha, it's not only Korach. He managed to convince 250 people. You can imagine what kind of influencer he was. And it was that close by his beautiful claims and arguments that he will take over the leadership from Moses. Something that will challenge the entire project of taking a nation and to bring them to Canaan to build a new society and new ideals of God in this world. And therefore, I believe the response of God was immediate, abrupt, and the harshest one. This had no place because this was a challenge that could ruin the entire project of taking the nation from Egypt and bringing them to Israel.
And the same thing happened with Julius Caesar. He went to the Senate that morning, although the soothsayer said to him, beware the Ides of March. In other words, watch yourself because they're out for you. And ultimately, he was murdered by his colleagues and his friends. And it's very interesting, that juxtaposition with Korach and his followers and Julius Caesar, that they were both killed, that they were both murdered.
And Moshe Rabbeinu was almost murdered himself. If not divine intervention, I do believe that the people will kill Moshe. Now, you have to understand, our sages are telling us that a person by the name of Hur, who was a son of Miriam, was killed in the scene of the golden calf. Like when people are behaving like a mob, that's very dangerous to certain people's life. And people take things, I don't want to compare it to Rabin, but that's the dynamics of a revolution. I do believe that there was a very high chance that Moshe Rabbeinu would be killed after all this.
And indeed, he fell on his face, as did his brother Aaron.
Namely, he was helpless. He could not do anything. And if God would not intervene, who knows what will be the end of it?
They're such harsh stories, though, Rabbi. the murder of these people, the earth gobbling up 250, not only Korach and the men who follow him, but their entire families.
It's very true.
Yeah.
And it tells you something about the dynamics of machloket and where can it lead to. Machloket, disagreement, quarrel in a community is the number one reason for breaking a community. This is something that actually we have to take into our attention, because what is happening now in Israel, and I don't want to compare here certain figures like Bibi and others to Moshe Rabbeinu. This is not the issue. But I would say one thing for sure, which is very, very important. No nation in the world will bring us to our knees. It never happened, and it will never happen. The only dangerous thing that threaten the Jewish existence are the fights from within. Because everyone fights with all force because they feel that this is the most important thing he can do for the Jewish people. The other one use the same force against it, and we ruin ourselves. This happened not to one community, not to two communities. This happened again and again. And by the way, think about the Torah telling us about it. Why the Torah, unlike other history books, is telling us about all these challenges? The Torah had to portray Moshe Rabbeinu as a person above everyone else, everyone except him. And you know what? Many historians did just that. You know, Churchill once said that history is going to judge him very favorably. And he said, you know why? Because I'm going to write history. So, you know, when you write the history, it's very favorable of you. The Torah never gave any break to our leaders. She told about their struggles, and some of them were imminent one, existential one. Because the Torah want to say that Jewish leadership has to go through these dynamics, and someone who wants to lead the Jewish people will have to go through these dynamics. And don't think when you read the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu was above any fight and above anyone else. No, he had to fight very bitter fights, of course, in the name of God, against his opponents. He was not accepted as someone that everyone has to accept him as the authority. And I think this honest report of the Torah teaches us even more about our leaders, rather than the Torah would portray them only in pink colors.
There is a body of work within Judaism, within Torah learning, called a Midrash. And before you answer my question in a moment, I'd like you also to explain what is a Midrash. Now, the Midrash suggests that Korach's descendants, people who came out of him years later, including Samuel, who's a great, great prophet, achieved greatness despite his rebellion. Similarly, some viewed Brutus as an honorable man. How do these narratives, Rabbi, complicate our understanding of morality in history?
Okay, this is a great question. This is a great question, because I will just repeat this Midrash. Because you might ask, wait a second, didn't the entire family of Korach just disappear? How is it possible that Samuel was one of his descendants? And actually, for this part, we don't need the Midrash. If people read the book of Divrei Hayamim, which is Chronicles, which is part of our Tanakh, they are going to see that Samuel came from the children of Asaph, who was a child of Korach. And, you know, as I talk to you, it's very, very interesting that some people were saved at the last minute from the entire episode of Korach. They had a second thought that saved their life. One of them is On Ben Pelet from the tribe of Reuven, and another one was the son of Korach himself, who managed to escape the whole family drama, and from his descendants came Samuel.
Okay.
Now, here is a point which I think is very, very important. We don't bear any punishment to the children because they're the sins of their grandparents or their parents. Jewish community is very open to accept even people that their family history is terrible. I'll give you a few examples actually. You know, there is a midrash that Rabbi Akiva, the greatest of all, that we know that he had some conversion in his family. In a certain place in the Talmud, our sages are telling us that he was a descendant from Sisera, the enemy of Israel, or from Neron, Caesar. Can you imagine that we actually even share it with the public, this knowledge that normally you want to hide, but exactly the opposite. We want to say, no matter what family was, the important thing is who you are. I once heard that a famous Hasidic Rebbe, someone came to him and told him about his family and so on, about his dynasty. So he said, you know what is the comment to potatoes and dynasties? He said, what is it? So he said, the best part of it is buried in the ground.
That's great.
A good
That's
one.
great. Yeah.
So for us, it's quite the same. It doesn't make any difference who was your grandparent. He could be a great righteous person, and he could be a terrible, a wicked person. But you know that in Yerushalayim today, you can go and you will find some people who look like pure Aryan because their grandparents were Nazis. And for all kinds of reasons, they convert. They wanted to atone for their parents' sins. And you know what? They sit in a cheder or they sit in a school, and no one really will ever mention to them, oh, your grandparent killed my grandparent. Once you decide to be part of this community, you are part of this community. And I think this is a message also with Samuel. He did not pay the price for his grandfather. But I want to share with you one more idea. Avrum, how do you see Brutus, the person who actually prevented Julius from assuming full power? What is your personal take about it?
Well, it's very difficult because, I mean, human behavior is such that we can be both very ideological and we can also have our own agenda. And the two often come together, and it's very hard to distinguish between them. I think with Brutus, I actually saw both.
So, you know, that's exactly the difference between Cassius, for example, who also had some motivation, personal motivation, and he envied Caesar. Brutus actually wanted to help the country. He wanted to help the Romans. He was an idealist that in our day, I would say was maybe a useful idiot, as Stalin called them. He was a noble person, apparently. By the way, some opinions are that he was illegal son of Caesar. I don't know if you read about it, but some people believe that the last words, by the way, it's the words of Shakespeare, but Shakespeare had a very good and profound knowledge of the Roman history. When he said, "Et tu, Bruto, like you, my son, also in this,"
Yes.
it was not just
when
like
he was killing
patronizing.
him, right? Yes.
He was a real son of him, and he knew it. Julius Caesar knew it. By the way, you know, it's interesting. We are in July. You know that July was named after Julius Caesar. And the next man, Augustus, is after his son. But I think that Julius Caesar himself never lived to live in the month of July. It was decided by the Senate to honor him by naming a month after him. But he was killed, as you said, in March, and I don't think that he arrived to this July. I think it was in 44 BC. I'm not sure about it, if it was a year before. But you can see the influence until this very day. We are in July. This is after Julius Caesar. So this is about his influence, or even on us in a way. Yeah.
Rabbi, I don't know if you know this, but the C-section, Caesarian section, is named after Julius Caesar. Apparently, according to some historians, he was the first one to be born through the C-section. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
I heard that in the Caesarian section, they used it in Rome. I highly doubt how successful it was because, they knew nothing about germs and things like this. If Julius was the first one to do it, I'm not sure. But can I teach you like a short lesson in Hebrew?
Please.
Did you ever heard the expression yotze dofen, like the exception to the rule? In Hebrew, it's called yotze dofen. Now, what is yotze dofen? Yotze dofen in Hebrew, from Sukkah, there is a dofen, there is a wall. What is yotze dofen? This is a very interesting expression that came from a Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat. The Mishnah said if a person was born in Caesarian birth, you don't do, and it happened on Shabbat, you don't do the brit the next week. How we define Caesarian section in Hebrew? Yotze dofen, because the baby come not normally, but from the dofen, from the wall of the womb, by surgery, by operation.
Right.
So a baby that was born in a Caesarian process is called yotze dofen. And from here, everything which is not exactly like exception to the normal, to the rule, got in Hebrew this expression of yotze dofen. So it's very interesting because I ask many people, do you know what is yotze dofen? Yeah, it's exception. Why it's yotze dofen? What's the connection between a wall, dofen, and exception to the rule? And very few people know it. So I thought, it's an opportunity to teach a little bit Hebrew.
Lovely. Thank you, Rabbi. What is the midrash? What is that?
Which midrash?
What is a midrash? I mean,
what is the midrash?
Let me give you a context here. When I started studying Chumash in depth, and people would speak about the midrashim, they would say, okay, here's the story of Korach. Here's what happened, and he challenged Moses' leadership. And the midrashim or the midrash says, and I'm thinking to myself, what is this midrash? Are they fairy tales? Are they stories? Who wrote them? Where did they come from? Give our viewers a bit of a context here.
You know what? I would love to devote one full program to it and to scan some of this midrashim. But I will say the following, which is very, very important. Listen, when you read the Torah, unlike Dostoevsky or Julius Caesar, you know very little about the story itself. If you try to take the story and to explain it to a normal person on the street, you, not the person on the street, you will realize that you miss so much about the context, about what happened before, why he said something like this, why he acted this way. You have no idea. I mean, the stories are beautiful, but once you dig in, they make sometimes no sense. By the way, this is one of the big problems of people who learn it in the Cheder, in the first year of their life. They repeated some of the stories later. And then when they read the story itself, it makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
And you can take every story, about Gan Eden and about the snake. They make no sense, period. Our sages understood that God, when he gave the Torah, he gave it as a book to guide us. Torah in Hebrew means the way that you have to go. Torah hora'ah, like Moreh teaches you what you have to do. The Torah is teaching us what to do. And our sages found the stories lack context sometimes. And here comes the Midrash, and he said, this is what I think happened. Why do I say I think what happened? Because sometimes the same verse will get two different interpretations based on a word in the pasuk. Now, that means that one of them is telling us something which is not correct? I don't think so. The Torah is a book of ideas. And one person can see this idea in this word, another one can see a different idea. And Parshat Korach is just one of them. We know the story, the average person knows the story. They rebelled, they were swallowed by the earth. But if you pay more attention, you see that some people were burnt actually and not swallowed. You don't know exactly why the 250 people who represented the most important echelon of of the nation joined Korach, you know nothing about it. You don't know why the Torah chose to put it next to the Parsha of Tzitzit from last week. There is a reason why the Torah put it there. Our sages came and tried to expose the connection between things, give it a context, to explain what were the ambitions of Korach and so on. So, is the Midrash the Torah? The answer is no. If the Midrash is inspired by the Torah and tell us something that we are missing from the Torah itself, the answer is yes. By the way, here is my or our little job, because sometimes, because we teach our children the Midrash, they don't separate between what the Torah is telling us and what the Midrash is telling us. And what I try to do actually with the literature is to show you the real world motivation behind things. So our sages have all kinds of ideas about Korach being humiliated by Elitzaphan taking part of the jobs in Beit HaMikdash. It doesn't say clearly in the Torah, but the Torah but our sages know very well what motivates people to oppose leadership. And they find some hints in the text itself that this was behind the story. So the Torah itself does not give you the entire picture. Our sages will do it instead. Okay. And it can be because family dynamics, because it was part of the Levites. It could be some intellectual issues. For example, I just talked about the proximity to the Parsha of Tzitzit. And our sages are telling us that Korach came with a talis that was all colored with tchelet, with this azure color. And they asked Moshe Rabbeinu, tell me, is this kosher or not? And Moshe Rabbeinu said, no. They said, what are you talking about? Intellectually, if one thread of this light blue is enough for the entire garment, then if the entire garment is colored with this color, it should be super kosher, with badats. And Moshe Rabbeinu said not. Now, what is the story behind it that the Torah does not even say a word about it? This Midrash come to highlight that there were intellectual issues here between Korach and Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu saw the mitzvot as something that given by God. Sometimes they have no reasoning that we can understand. Korach was right. Kal v'chomer, like, if one thread is enough, how much more so if the entire garment? But it's not only about intellectual issues. But our sages highlight here that the story of the Torah has much more depth into it than the eye see in first glance.
I think your idea about doing an entire show on Midrashim is an outstanding idea because many questions come to mind, one of which, who wrote the Midrash? But we will not go into that now. We'll save that so our viewers have something to look forward to. Rabbi, considering the complex motives of Korach and Brutus, of which they were quite complex, how do their stories reflect the duality of human nature, especially in the context of leadership and power?
Leadership is always contested. People, strong people, looks on other leaders who were lucky, if it's divine one like Moses, or by assuming lots of power like Julius Caesar. Julius was a very smart, intellectually, but not only that, socially. He had people skill. And, to become like an emperor or Caesar, because emperors were the next, historical change in Rome. But until Caesar, it was, they were Caesars, like kings. He knew how to assume the power. It was not easy in Rome. There was many people that you had to befriended, to fight against, to create coalitions. That's why I love to read about the emperors of Rome, the Republic of Rome, because if you really want to understand what's going on in our world, you have to go to the cradle of it. and it was Rome. It was the Greeks, it was Rome. It's fascinating, and you know what? Maybe we should do another podcast one day about the Jews and Rome. And we did
Sounds
not,
good.
by the way, touched upon something that you will not read in most books: the relationship between the Jews and Julius Caesar, which were excellent, by the way. I'll just give you one bit. When he was murdered, did you visit Rome, Avrum?
Not yet. No.
By the way, the place that we believe Julius Caesar was killed is meters away from the ghetto from. There is a whole site today. It's a cat sanctuary. You won't believe it. Like thousands of cats in the temples, the ancient temples where Julius was murdered. But anyway, when they brought him to the Palatine Hill to be buried, the Jewish community stayed there for the entire Shiva on his grave. And in the year that Julius Caesar was murdered, all the babies in Rome, Jewish babies in Rome, were named Julius to show honoring to the dead Caesar. And it was for a good reason, because I'll give you just one example. Julius Caesar allowed the Jewish community to rest on Shabbat. In the Roman, at the time, not working was a sin, and he gave them the permission not to work on Shabbat, something that obviously saved the Jewish community. Taxes, for example, from the people in Israel, because he was befriended with the Hashmonites in Israel, on the year of Shemitah, he exempted them from taxes.
What is Shemitah? What is Shemitah?
Shemitah is the year that you don't work in the field, so they did not have enough to raise taxes to the Romans, and he exempted them for 1 year every 7 years. This was a big thing. And he allowed them to handle their own laws in the Jewish community. This was very noble and very unusual for minorities in Rome. And the Jews knew how to pay respect back to Julius when he was murdered. And indeed, because of it, Augustus later, who assumed he became an emperor, there was good relationship with the Jews until a certain point that we all know about 100 and something years later that led to the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, but this is a different story.
So, Rabbi, you have a lot of complexities in these stories. Both of them speak to human nature, if not at least the duality of human nature, if not more, that a person can strive to do very good. As you said about Caesar, he began as a simple administrator, and he rose up in the ranks because he had great ambition. And there's a really good possibility, as you mentioned, that he wanted to do good for the people, right? We might say that about Korach as well. It could be that he was challenging Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership because he was saying, Moshe, look what happens when one person has such a profound monopoly on leadership, right?
And you know what? One day, the ideology of Korach is going to actually be accepted. The Torah is telling us that, in the end of days, when redemption is going to come, we will be all Mamlechet Kohanim Vegoy Kadosh. We are going to be a kingdom of Kohanim, of priests, and holy nation. That means that every one of us is going to be kind of a king. Every one of us is going to be on the highest level. So one day, actually, the ideology of Korach is going to take place. All the nation is going to be holy people. All the nations are going to lead the way to the entire world. So the ideas of Korach were not completely buried. And by the way, I think this is part of what Shmuel did. Samuel, the prophet, he was the one who crowned Saul and David to show the mistake of Korach for the time being. There is a leader, must be a leader that will lead the people. But one day, as I said, it's going to be democratized. Now, I don't know how many of our listeners can follow the next idea. But the Ari, one of the greatest Kabbalists 500 years ago,
Mystics.
mystics, he said, there is a very famous pasuk that many of us know from Kabbalah Shabbat. Tzaddik katamar yifrach. A righteous person is going to be tall as a palm tree. Now, if you take for the listeners who know a little bit Hebrew, you take the tzaddik, you take the last letter is kof. Tzaddik, kuf. Katamar, the last letter is reish. Yifrach, the last letter is chet. Kuf, reish, chet. Which means it's at the end of the word. Right now, the ideology of Korach, of no leadership, has no place. But at the end of days, his ideology is going to be right. It's going to be democratized. All the Jewish people are going to be on a high level. But sometimes certain ideas are going to wait until the right time will ripe and we'll be ready for this. By the way, here is a surprise, Avrum. You know who I heard this idea from?
No, who?
From Rabbi Rosensweig, who came from New York. He gave a beautiful shiur in Clanton Park. I had the merit to hear it, your uncle. And he spoke about the Parsha of Korach.
Ah, very good.
So this is like a personal surprise. I give it back to you,
Thank
to the
you.
family.
Zacharenu Levracha, he has passed away. But he was, it's interesting. You talk about my uncle, and the complexity of humankind and our character and our personalities. The last 2-3 years of his life, he and I became very, very close. Wow. He was in his 90s. He was a powerful Talmud Chacham. He knew a lot of Torah, and he had been a fine leader throughout his life, going to the White House a number of times, leading a synagogue, being the president of the Rabbinical Council of America. So he's very special. And when he was old, he and I became friends. We became close, and it was lovely. So it is truly a gift, and I thank you for mentioning that, Rabbi.
Sure.
We're really happy to be here, aren't we?
I am. Absolutely. I'm waiting for it.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And just sort of a synopsis of what we spoke about today. It was bringing together a portion in the Torah, which is called Korach. That's the title of it. And we'll speak more about titles in the Torah at some point, much to speak about in the future. And we compared it to, we put it next to, make brothers and sisters, if you will, with classic literature. And in this case, Julius Caesar. We spoke a lot about leadership. We've talked a lot about the complexity of being a leader and the challenge to leadership. And I think at least one of the salient points is indeed that of our discussion, that leaders are very particular people. They're individuals who have great ambition in life, and they strive towards a particular goal in life. Sometimes it's being head of a committee, and sometimes it's being a president. But very often there are individuals who are standing behind them who are not happy with their leadership. And that may be because they don't agree with how they lead. Or it might be that they themselves see themselves as greater leaders than that person who's standing in that position at that time. So what would be the moral of the story here, Rabbi? What can we as regular folk in 2024 take away from this for ourselves?
I think that we, the people who are being led or leaders, we have to remember that it's not about ourselves. And when people choose their leader, they should not choose them upon their beautiful words. Very important part of this play of Julius Caesar is about the amazing art and influential art of orating and how dangerous it can be, because you can change the mind of people very easily. So we should not be too impressed with beautiful words. A leader for us must be a person who really cares, who really does things for the community and can prove it. This is at least my lesson from it. And you are absolutely right. You know, one of the issues in our Parsha and Julius Caesar is the name. You know, if you read Julius Caesar, the main story is not about Julius Caesar. Actually, he died I think in the third act, and all the rest is what happened afterwards. It's very deceiving. It's not about Julius Caesar. It's about the dynamics of Brutus and what happened to Rome after he passed away. So it's a nice way to deceive us to think that we read about Julius Caesar, but actually we read about the people who came after him and the motivation behind his murder. And Parshat Korach is quite the same.
Yes, it is.
You give the name of Korach.
That's right.
Actually, the story is not about Korach. The story is about Moshe and his leadership. Korach is just a vehicle to show what is the difference between a regular leader who seeks sometimes his own benefits and the true leader who is appointed by God for the right reasons.
Rabbi, I enjoyed this very much. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for doing this together with me. Can you give our listeners and our viewers a sense of what we can expect next week?
Yeah, but before that, if you liked this podcast, please, 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 I'm not an expert in social media, but I do know if you write a comment, more people can enjoy it. And I do believe that many people enjoy it. Let me tell you just this short story. One of our literature teachers, someone who don't open Tanakh or Torah, she told me that it was just a changing experience for her. And I'm sure that many people can enjoy it. Please recommend it to your friends. It's not for us. We don't make money out of it. It's for the sake of spreading new understandings in Torah to every person in the Jewish community and beyond. So please like and send it to and share. This is number one. Next week, we are going to talk about a very dark topic. I have to warn you in advance. This is Parshat Chukat, where we read about the red heifer. We read about death, the major theme in the Parsha. It's not an easy topic to discuss. And in order to do that, I decided to talk about the book of the death of
Ivan Ilyich.
Yeah, Ivan Ilyich. This is from Tolstoy. Very powerful story and an excellent step to enter to the entire new world of Russian literature, which is different than what we usually read here in America, but very interesting, very detailed, very profound. So we are going to talk about the concept of death in the Russian literature and especially in this book.
If you want to study the Parsha, the portion of the Torah, prior to the shir, prior to the class that we will be giving next week, you can do so online. There's a wonderful website, which is sefaria.org, Sefaria. It's a compilation of all the major books in Jewish thinking, Jewish law, Torah, Tanakh, the Talmud, etc., etc. And if you want to pick up this novella of which we speak, Ivan Ilyich, I actually bought it on Amazon. It's 54 pages, and you can get it overnight. And it's wonderful reading. And as I said at the top of our show today, I do want to thank Rabbi Shlomo Gemara for launching this idea, for sharing it with me, because I am now reading classic literature that I have not read before. I want to stay as far away from Tolstoy as possible because of the idea that Russian literature is so thick with names and details that I thought I just can't do it. But I started to read it and I love it. So, Rabbi, thank you again for that. I appreciate it a lot.
You made me happy now.
Yeah, no, wonderful. We wish everybody a great week and a beautiful Shabbat. Am Yisrael Chai, the nation of Israel lives. Be proud to be a Jew. And if you truly, truly want to understand what our Judaism is all about, it really comes down to learning Torah. This is the greatest gift that we have. And it is something that you will ultimately embrace once you start to understand the essence of it. And again, what we hold in our hands. So Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We're very excited about this series, and we are just so incredibly excited about being with you once again next week. Take care, and thank you very much.